If you would like to follow along with our reading, then please look at the list on the screen now. It'll show you all the books we intend to read for the next 3 episodes. Thank you and enjoy the podcast.
Y'all ain't ready for this conversation.
Welcome back to Whiskey and Words. I actually don't know what episode number this is. I think it's 5.
I think it is 5, yeah.
Is it 5? That's a good number. We are tonight very lucky to be joined with our special guest, local artist, Ben Ronayne. We will be putting his Instagram in the description, and we will also be featuring a few of his paintings as in the video
Which I was not aware of.
You are now. We are here to review both a whiskey and a book. The whiskey of today is Talisker Skye, and Matthew will be doing our little review of that. And our book today is Madonna in a Fur Coat by Sabahattin Ali. Matthias, do you want to kick us off with the whiskey?
Okay, so the Talisker Skye is a whiskey from, surprise, surprise, Skye in Scotland. Should we have a quick taste of this and see what we think first?
Let's give it a go.
Yeah.
Smoky.
Smoky.
A little peatiness in there.
Yeah.
Anything extra to add before I give it the description?
There's a bit of sea salt almost. Can you taste that salt in the back of the tongue?
That's a little bit. Maybe. I'm getting a almost clove kind of taste. Like very faintly.
Let me go straight into the description then. It's quite a simple description compared to some of the whiskies we've had.
A little bit spicy.
From the softer shores of the dark, jagged hills of the Cullen and the remote peninsulas of the north, Skye's challenging landscape is richly varied, yet always beautiful. And onto the description, the taste.
It's like a little forest out there.
Yeah.
Okay. Talisker Skye has a smoky sweetness with marine tones, which is the salt, I'm guessing. Yeah.
Nice.
And
your palate's
It's improving.
becoming refined.
And a spicy edge.
Oh, nice. Well played, Ben.
Rugged in beauty like the wild Hebridean island.
That is another little tourism pitch from Matthew.
No, but that is very modest of a description compared to what we normally get.
That's true. I mean, what it said was just marine and spicy.
There was also sweet, but peaty or sweet and smoky undertones, wasn't it?
Yeah, smoky sweetness.
Yeah,
Smoky sweetness.
You got peat as well. I'm actually impressed. I think we did. That's the best we've done. I mean,
that's 100%, isn't it? That's our first 100%.
I did think we got the sweetness.
And you didn't get the wild Hebridean island either.
I felt it though.
So I'm going to hand you over to Luke, who is going to do our brief synopsis of tonight's book.
Yeah, so the book initially is from the perspective of an unnamed narrator who's a bit down on their luck, a bit dejected, but through a contact gets a basically menial job at this firm and comes across a colleague who's quite a meek and reserved character, but one that fascinates him. And as they get closer and more friendlier, their kind of relationship grows. But the book kind of changes tack quite quickly, and it ends up focusing, in fact, on a diary that this reserved, meek individual called Raif gives the unnamed narrator, which basically kind of explains his experience of living in 1920s Berlin, I think it was, just after he left school when he was meant to be training in candle making, soap making. And it's kind of charting his year or so in Berlin, and ultimately it's really a love story. It's about his fascination with painting that he sees in a gallery called Madonna in a Fur Coat, which he's infatuated with the Madonna in the painting, and actually eventually meets the artist who is also the model for the painting, and it's kind of about their relationship and the highs and lows of that.
Let's just kick us off with general impressions, thoughts. What do people think of this book?
You first, Ben.
For me, as a person who doesn't read too many books, I really enjoyed it, and it left me with just a real kind of sadness, but triumph at the end in some ways. I don't know. It's a really enjoyable book.
Yeah, I have to second that. It's actually what's sad about this, was that I read it so quickly. We decided we'd do this book about a month ago, and within 2 days I'd read the book because I love the dialogue between the two, Raif and Maria, and I love that it was love in such a non-aesthetic sense. It was love of personality, love of an individual's own unique traits, and I thought that was something that you with many of the romance and love stories that you see in the modern day, you don't generally get that pure depiction of how people as different beings and the types of things that attract each other. So yeah, from that perspective, I thought it was a really fascinating and great book.
Mm.
For me, yeah, it was along with what you said completely. What I found very interesting was Raif, who has this love affair with Maria. It's quite pure. It's not very sexualized. Partly because while Raif does have sexual thoughts, he's too embarrassed whenever he has them to even communicate. So he can only communicate in a very innocent way. And it explores a lot with the relationship between the two. And it comes to a very tragic end where you sort of want to read the book again.
Yeah, it was definitely a lot different compared to the books we've done so far. A lot more tender, a lot more kind of fragile almost as a novel. But I very much enjoyed it. He kind of captures the swings between melancholy and the elation that comes from love very well. And it was just a very well told story with quite interesting characters as well. I think Raif and Maria are obviously these conflicting characters, but both also quite delicate as well. So I think he constructed them in a really interesting way. So yeah, I have to say I enjoyed it.
Okay, let's go straight into our questions. So our first one is describe Raif Effendi as you first meet him through the narrator's description.
Okay, I'll start off with this. When you first meet him, he's this older chap who is always sick, never willing to protect himself when anyone has a go at him. Obviously clever, but incredibly reserved. And this is what's so mysterious about him. People are so rude around him, even his own family, as we find later on, while he's supporting them. But he gets all this abuse, but he never fights back. But he always seems to, because he's not fighting back, or he's not getting overly annoyed, it's as if he has something going on in his head, which is obviously what fascinates the narrator. How is this guy so resilient to abuse and just keeps on going? But yeah, so Raif, to begin with, you're not instantly, but you become interested in him and what he's hiding. And of course, when that diary gets read, you understand it far more so.
Yeah.
What I enjoyed was how the author developed this idea of seeing somebody in the street, and you might see their face and you form kind of a general stereotype of them, but as soon as you see the world from their eyes, it opens a completely different narrative and picture. I think that is something that he does so well with Raif. Is from the outside he's this boring family man who just who is just a translator at a company, and he's been translating monotonous translations year after year. But as soon as you look further than that, there's this complete underbelly that is being open to 1920s Berlin, romance with somebody who's intellectually very impressive.
It was one of the opening not statements, but in the opening pages, that you walk past people in the street not knowing their backstories, but it's something quite incredible.
It's the classic expression, don't judge a book by its cover.
Yeah.
And that, I thought, the whole was about for me. Really, we don't know anything about this guy really until you read his diary, and then you realise that he's had this life, this incredible kind of story, and this
incredible life only for a year. and then mundanity after that.
I think this is what feeds into that mystery you're talking about from the narrator's perspective, because he's a man who's just exploited in every facet of his life. You know, his entire family relies on him financially, but neglects him, abuses him. At work, he's exploited. He has no kind of career opportunities, and yet he's so placid about it. And the narrator first notices him just doing little sketches and seeming as if he's living this kind of tranquil life where nothing can touch him. But it's that quite interesting character development then, where you obviously hear about this really exciting tale of him going to Berlin and then trying to break free of kind of the trodden path that was in front of him, going into soap making. And then as you learn more and more about this love story, you realise the way he is because he's just defeated. He's literally kind of just become a shell, empty of emotion. It's not that he's actually tranquil. It's just that he's completely given up on life for the past 20 years or however long it is. So it's interesting because the narrator's first perception lays a very good foundation to then have the character evolve in your own mind as a person through the book.
I just thought he came across as a very bitter person. Do you know what I mean? The start of the book, he was bitter about the world, and how it had treated him. And I could feel that in the first few chapters,
Bitter but wouldn't fight back.
The world had eaten him up, and he spat him back out. And that's kind of why he was so bitter about the world, You feel like he couldn't bring any joy into his life.
Yeah, an interesting thing that I think should be discussed is, anxiety and mental health is something that really, I think, Raif personifies. His inability to be able to express himself in large groups or at least with other people, has this real, as a male character, has a real negative influence on all of his aspects of his life. He's often described in the book as a girl or has female qualities, and
this is a younger man.
Yes, as a younger man, and it's interesting to see how that, how having more of a less macho side to you is very much played out in this book in the narrator's sense, as not having the opportunities, not having the lifestyle, not having the connections that you might have had if you were a bit more.
This is very unfortunate as well, because you can see he was a guy who kind of grew up in this quite well nurtured background. His life was quite controlled, and he it developed into someone who was very, very shy, very reserved, as we've said, awkward sexually, not particularly affable. He's not the most gregarious individual. And then he just has such brief glimmer of real life, maturity, and finding himself as a person, and it's immediately crushed.
It's very important. It's very important to say his first love dies, as we'll go on to, which is a pretty hard hitting for anybody.
But he doesn't find out about that until much later.
Yeah, I suppose so.
So, moving on to the next question. Why do you think the author sets this novel in 1920s Berlin, or at least he moves his protagonist from kind of a Turkish rural background and centers him into, the swinging city of Berlin?
For me, it's a very obvious reason. It's the author Sabahattin Ali's life. He even met a girl called Maria when he went to Germany. I'm not sure if it was the 1920s or 1930s. So for me, that's obvious.
That's amazing, because I actually saw a picture of the author today, and the way that I was picturing Raif in the book was actually, I saw him. I almost saw him. I saw a picture of him, and actually thought that's exactly how I pictured him in the book. And it's quite weird that the author, like you said, there's direct comparisons with the author and Raif.
I suppose the irony here is actually Sabahattin Ali, who is the author, was a very outspoken critic at times of the government, and that being outspoken in, I don't know the government regime at the time, but it ultimately led to his death in 1946 or something like that, where he was
trying to escape the country.
It's actually a very interesting story, because his smuggler at the time admitted to hitting Sabahattin Ali over the head with a shovel and killing him. And guess how long he served in prison?
20 years.
4 weeks.
4 weeks.
Yeah.
But didn't he have ties to the National Security Service as well? the smuggler.
Yeah,
He's like connected
I think,
to.
at least from briefly looking into it, it seems that it was kind of a cover-up job by the government to say we blame this guy and then we'll let him out in 4 weeks.
It is quite common that authors leave the country and carry on writing books about that country once they leave. So
Maybe it's kind of autobiographical, but speculatively. If he did live this life in Berlin and he did know Maria, maybe he did have this kind of blossoming romance that fell apart. Maybe this is him imagining his life if he hadn't got himself back together. Maybe because I don't think he released his first book till 1937, 35, something like that.
Yeah.
So if he was there in the 20s, he had that kind of big gap, and maybe it's him imagining what his life could have been if he hadn't taken a more positive path. I don't know. That's kind of conjecture, but I suppose that's the easiest basis to use if you're writing a book, and then particularly if you don't want to make it completely about your experience, just try and imagine different ways your life could have gone.
Yeah, definitely.
So one thing I think we should move into is that first scene where Raif enters the museum and he stares at this painting. What was your take on that?
That was
scene?
one of my favourite scenes in the book for me.
Yeah, it was humorous.
It was my favourite scene.
So, I mean,
Are we talking about the scene where he is sitting on the bench and doesn't realise he's actually talking to Maria?
Yeah.
That for me is the best moment.
So just to give a bit of backdrop, Maria, who is also a painter and the love of Raif's life, has painted this picture of herself in a fur coat, and Raif falls in love in the art gallery with this painting, and he is staring at it, monotonously for hours. And anyway, Maria, who's painted it, approaches him to say, what do you think of this painting? And Raif still doesn't know that she's necessarily the painter or anything. And it's kind of a very humorous depiction of, I don't know.
Well, she comes over as a very confident woman at that point, and of course he's very shy.
It says a lot about him, like you say, he's shy, and he didn't even look at her face. He was focused so much on the painting and looking at her feet, he didn't even see her face. And that's quite interesting.
But he was so incredibly embarrassed about his actual feelings as well that he claimed it was because he was there because the painting reminded him of his mother.
He's made up a lie.
Yeah, he's made up a lie, which you'd think almost torpedo any love interest there. If you're telling the girl you're interested in, she reminds you of her mother. That scene is interesting. I found the one that was more fascinating is when he goes to see her show at the what's it called, the Atlantic Club.
Cabaret.
And I mean, yeah, the cabaret, and you can just imagine a boy like him going to a cabaret, and he's clearly nervous and anxious, and he doesn't really read the signals very well between her performance and her genuine interest, and it kind of really encapsulated just how fragile he is.
Naive.
Yeah. And then how much maybe, not that she exploited that, but took advantage of it at different stages.
What I really loved about Raif was he really depicts manliness in a very tender light. He is nervous, he is anxious, he isn't this macho hero type. He's somebody on the back foot and really does love for individual personality, not just for sexual quality. And I thought there was a real, I don't know, a very different portrayal of a man that I'd never really come across in a book before. I thought that was a really interesting take on it.
For me, there were three main traits with Raif. There was the one that I found most endearing was there was some sort of purity where he evaluated everything in such a nice manner. But then there were the two more negative traits, which was the shyness, which is so obvious throughout the book, but also his lack of willing to work hard on anything. For example, when he loses contact with her, towards the end of the book with Maria, he doesn't try and use his contact, which could be that lady in the house, to try and find her.
That blew my mind.
Yeah. Also, when he first goes to try and learn the art of soap making, he barely turns up, even though that's what he was paid to do. That's what his parents paid him to go there for. Yet he just reads books in his room. There's that one trait of Raif that I get quite annoyed by. Is his work ethic is awful.
No, he's just so mercurial. I mean, he will have these moments where he feels elated, and then like a little pin in a balloon,
Mm.
it'll suddenly deflate and he'll immediately get dejected and depressed. And he does very little to try and lift himself out of that. He almost wallows in it. He
He
enjoys
loves
it in a
Ronayne.
way. Yeah. And so for me, that was the trait of his which bothered me the most. That he never really helped himself, and he just had no resilience to any kind of adversity in life. He was always 100% invested in his own mind, but any kind of minor little inconvenience or minor little change would just send him into a spiral.
What I really liked about it was giving a perspective, because obviously this is a perspective of a lot of people. There are a lot of people who are very shy about the world and entering it,
And potentially have a lot to give.
Yeah, exactly. And they do have the emotional side. It's just because they're so scared of interactions and being so shy, or I think a lot of people relate to it being in social circumstances where they might not be able to feel free to express themselves for fear of expressing who they actually are, because they might not be the orthodox person that people particularly wanted them
I think
to
we
be.
have a lot of luck in Western society. We have an alcohol throughout our later teenage years to help us.
But exactly, without alcohol and that kind of social lubricant, I think it would have been a lot more difficult to develop your own
To
personality.
get that confidence to talk to that first girl would have been a lot more
I
tricky.
think also, like, obviously he comes from Turkey, going to Berlin. It's a bit of an adventure. I found the book. I thought for me, like when he's in Berlin, it's an adventure. It's like he goes there and he finds this girl, and from there his life is just an adventure.
It's a wonderland.
It's a wonderland in his own head, and like.
But it's only a wonderland once he meets the girl. He gets very bored of Berlin before that. Berlin, the 1920s Berlin, wasn't such a boring place.
But it's like if you ever go to a new town anywhere, you're excited, and you have all these emotions of excitement about meeting new people, reinventing yourself. I feel in the book he can actually be whoever he wants. Do you know what I mean? In that city,
he's got the opportunity.
He's got the opportunity.
He's got the opportunity to do it, but he doesn't take it.
Well, he follows her down the alley, doesn't he? And he pursues what he wants.
It's quite creepy.
In some ways, he does follow what his head is telling him at times, He followed her down the alley, quite weird. He almost stalked her into that bar.
It's weirdly heroic what he does, even though it comes across as complete stalker behavior.
Yeah.
But there is something that it's so against his own inclination, but he still goes and follows her.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
In a new town, you do things you wouldn't do back home, or it's quite. I find like it's like it going on an adventure.
I think that's maybe something that because I know this book is loved. I think it features on the bestseller book very recently in Turkey, and I wonder if that's something that we haven't explored, because Berlin 1920s, it sounds a very vibrant, interesting place, but we have experienced Western values of, say, London or other major cities.
Yeah.
So there isn't such a culture clash that there would have been going from rural Turkey, maybe Ankara, I don't know what it is, but then going into the heartland of this depression, 1920s cabaret life. That's something that maybe we don't understand, the kind of cultural clash of moving between those two worlds.
Maybe, but I don't think it's the kind of cultural clash which affects him so much. It's all internalized, a lot of the issues he has, or a lot of the concerns or worries he has. It doesn't seem to actually faze him that much being in a new city at any point.
No.
He seems to like going to the museums. He'll chat a little bit to the people in his hostel, basically.
But he mainly reads.
He mainly reads, and he seems quite happy. Well, maybe not happy, but he seems to not be capable of kind of breaking out of this mundane pattern he's in, until it's just by chance, really, that he comes across this painting that she notices him and comes over to talk to him, and there's a lot of kind of chance meetings that lead to what is actually really the only exciting part of his adventure in Berlin.
So we've talked a lot about Raif. Maybe we should introduce Maria.
That's what the story really took off for me. I was really interested by her, and just obviously I was seeing it through the eyes of Raif. Like, he first of all sees her in the painting, and then this woman becomes a reality in his life. That's quite interesting. When you go to see a painting in an art gallery, that's something which you may never come into contact with, but this woman is in the same city, and it's
it's weird to feel that art on on a showpiece, then literally,
and then in a physical presence.
Yeah,
that's quite weird.
I mean, that's what art is, isn't it? It's kind of personifying real emotions, and
Yeah, it's
she's
you're
as the artiste.
yeah.
That's a question I've had for you actually. We will go back to Maria, but as somebody, an aspiring artist, where did that drive or the motivation or ability to draw and do the things that you do come from?
Oh, to be honest, from an early age, I just always been painting, drawing. It's just something that comes naturally. To be honest, it's just I never thought I was that good when I was young. I was just happy doing it, and I think over time, you realise when people say to you, "Oh, you've got quite a knack for this," you gain more confidence in.
There was an interesting statement that Raif made when he was studying art in Istanbul, and the fact he was pretty good at art, but he could only ever did very, I'm going to put it as timid pieces, very standard pieces, because he didn't have the confidence to show off his real artistic side and what was going on in his head.
Yeah, you only see that in the first scene, in the narrator's scene, where he talks about him sketching.
Yeah, and you see something incredibly artistic.
Yeah,
but he hides it away. He never shows it to the world.
Oh, sorry.
Do you think that's something that a lot of artists suffer
Oh God,
from?
yeah. Oh no, I really empathise with him in some sense. When you think you've done something really good, but you're actually terrified to show it to the world sometimes, because you think everyone's going to reject it.
It's a big step to take, isn't it?
It's
And
terrifying.
open
It's
yourself
terrifying.
up to scrutiny and
It's no
criticism.
it's no different to
You must be worried about appearing on this podcast.
fucking terrifying. Terrifying. No, but
Publicity, yeah.
it's like no different to anybody else's craft. Like a paint job. If you're if you're a painter or an author, you're terrified of what people think of you.
Oh, 100%.
It's,
No, again, I suppose that's something that this book broaches quite nicely, is that fear to express your inner self.
Yeah.
And who is going to receive or be receptive to that. I think that's, the only two people that we really come across in the whole book that really do, understand Raif is firstly the narrator and Maria.
yeah.
And, in his whole entire life, he only has two pieces of other individuals who have some type of relationship that respect and appreciate him as an individual. Everybody else, he shies away because he doesn't want to. Yeah, what is the reason that he shies away from expressing himself to other individuals?
He's scared of ridicule,
You think?
Yeah.
I think he's scared of. Yeah,
I think
the anxiety.
I would
being
say
ridiculed.
actually after Maria, it's self-hate. He loves self-hate. That's why even when it is wife, he never opens up to his wife. And this is something I don't actually like about the character Raif. He gets married after he leaves Germany, and Maria's no longer talking to him, and he gets married. He talks about how he never loved his wife, how him and his wife never had a personal connection. Not that he even tried to attempt it at the beginning, but then you see the wife crying on his deathbed, and she's obviously got that emotional connection. But in his diary, he hasn't even written about it. It's as if after Maria, life on an emotional sense is not worth continuing. And it's quite selfish, actually.
I don't know about you guys, but I think every other character in this book was completely irrelevant in some ways. It was all about their relationship. I just felt like everybody else was just a pass-by. Can you name a character which was really as...
No,
do you know what I mean?
Only the unnamed narrator.
It is all about that relationship at the heart of it. That's the crux of it.
Book. None of those kind of supporting characters actually not that they were vapid, but they weren't enormously engaging either. There, because I think for him he never wanted to distract away from what was inside Raif's head, and obviously just his obsession with Maria as well. And I think that kind of a part of it might be to create that feeling of his fixation, since it is from his perspective. None of the other characters seem to come into it because he's got the blinkers on. He never really spends the time to get to know them or appreciate their importance to him. Like people in his hostel are actually quite supportive of him and do kind of help him and try and be friendly to him, but he just disregards it most of the time. I mean, he doesn't write to his father anymore. He doesn't write to his family. He literally has no other connection in the world. Really,
everyone's an inconvenience.
Yeah, pretty much
in his life,
Yeah.
Okay, let's hit back onto Maria. What were your kind of guiding impressions when you first get introduced to her?
really like her. Obviously, with Raif, you're the whole time getting the personal narrative in his head. And that I find that a bit tiresome. But Maria is saying things which you wouldn't normally expect a lady to say. And she's saying them rapidly, and she's saying some very interesting things, very different character. And also, her background is a challenging background, unlike Raif. Raif has come from a family of wealth. Maria, on the other hand, not from a family of wealth, ill mother, had to be a nurse in the First World War, so she's seen some pretty horrific things. She's dealt with, obviously, a lot of men. She's worked in the cabaret. She's a very experienced woman in comparison to Raif. So basically, you're looking at a woman who knows the world compared to the naivety of Raif.
Yeah, like she's very headstrong, quite embittered, very resilient, but I think also clearly has her own issues as well, and in many ways, because of her experiences, there's clearly almost this traumatized side to her, which makes her almost, incapable of love, or she believes she's incapable of love. So you actually have two very flawed individuals who are both trying to
on the different side of the spectrum,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah,
You've
but
got-
only
massively.
2 years age difference. She's, I believe, 26. He's 24 in the book, and it feels like Maria's lived so many other lives.
yeah, well,
And it feels like she's had so many more experiences in life. Than
Raif feels
And,
like a 16-year-old boy, 15-year-old
Yeah.
boy, even when he's 24.
I think she does. Yeah, it's interesting because you get Rafe obviously is kind of head over heels and wants to express this undying love, and you get her who's just so kind of critical of anything like that, and so much of their conversation is, based around her trying to almost impart like a real world view to him. She clearly views him as like very naive, and feels he needs to understand the real world more. But then,
Because he's so naive, she's happy to tell him everything.
yeah, that's true actually.
I kind of felt like she'd been mistreated by men her whole life.
But isn't that
That's
the
why I
Yeah.
felt,
isn't that the quality she sees in him? Innocence
Mm.
and naivety, and that's something that's been taken away from her with all of her experiences in life.
Yeah.
She's lost that innocence of love and affection and sweetness and tenderness.
But yeah, she has to be a cabaret artist because her artwork doesn't pay for her, being able to eat, putting food on the table.
Well, this is it. She has such a hard life and clearly deals with difficult individuals and seen horrible things. And for all the things you can say about Rafe, is one thing is you would never see anything sinister or evil in him at all. Like
pure.
he is pure. And then so it shows a lot about her character, how much she's drawn to that. I think she clearly thinks she's like just swirling around in this big pool of darkness, and he's this little light because he could never be horrible, never be cruel, and could never harm her.
What do you think the author is trying to say about the idea of soulmates?
It's very delicate the way he goes about it, because we've said they're such conflicting characters and almost contradictory. You look at the two of them in a vacuum, and then together, and it doesn't make much sense. So, or it doesn't feel like it should make sense, them being in love, because they're such different personalities. But I think that's the point he's trying to make, that when it comes to soulmates, people try and be a bit formulaic. You need to have the same interests, or you need to find the same things funny, or they tried to categorize it, but actually it's this, every single soulmate meeting is kind of unique, and it's a lot of different webs interweaving that make it work and kind of make that love happen. And then that's what he actually portrays really well, how that develops and how that grows.
Yeah, I loved how he slowly tickled the ideas of love, of just a chance encounter. Then they go to the cabaret, and then they start having conversations, and then they start walking together. And that to me is how. I know people say love is you can have love on first attraction, but for me, love is a much longer process. It's a real getting to know somebody else and seeing the world through their eyes and seeing how they appreciate you. And I feel like that whole building process and that networks of connections is something that is really beautifully articulated throughout the novel.
in his life. Like, it's quite weird, she was the only person in his life which made him feel special, or actually made him feel alive.
Yeah.
Everyone else was completely insignificant. Like, that's quite soulmates. Do you know what I mean? It's amazing how one person can change your life.
I think you've got
You know?
two different versions of kind of being and falling in love. Like
Yeah.
for Raif, he loves her as soon as he just sees the painting. So then anything she does after that, he just loves that automatically. It's like unconditional, no matter the things she says or the things she does or how she treats him. He's just immediately got that kind of unconditional love from the start. Whereas for her, she's obviously almost suspicious of him because he seems so pure and nice and shy. And then as she gets to know him, she sees it's all authentic, and you can see the love with her grows more.
Yeah, she changes her mind, doesn't she?
So you've got these two kind of conflicting versions of falling in love as well. People who've doing it in two different ways almost.
Yeah, what really reflects on actually quite modern life is when you've got a friendship between a boy and a girl, there is always, and it's becoming a very close friendship, the fear that sex might happen. Because when sex might happen, it completely changes the dynamic. They can either become, boyfriend, girlfriend, or it can ruin everything. And it's something this novel plays on the whole time, that should the relationship go any further than being very good friends and ever become sexual in any way, it could do one of two things. It could make the relationship absolutely solid, or could do the opposite. It could distance the two of them. And I think it's very true.
You get that in that's relatable, I think. Very relatable.
And that's what Raif's fear is. Like, if he does try and forward himself in a more of a masculine way, the fear of losing this girl, his one real soulmate, is too much. And it's one of the reasons why he doesn't do it. It's only really when Maria later on encourages them to get drunk.
He's a total gentleman, in some ways.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? He does not force us. He doesn't force himself once upon her.
Yeah, he's always courteous to the ninth degree.
And really, that's in some ways the way a man should be, because it's a real man.
I think, Elliot touched on this before. He does bring up a lot of questions about, what is a man and how should a man behave? Because there's many parts that you think, oh, he's kind of pathetic, but then actually those same parts lead him to behaviour that's very noble and very pure and actually.
It's very noble and very pure, but at the end of the day, would you ever find your wife through his type of behaviour? Maybe it would take you many, many years.
You'd be surprised.
I think we're probably viewing it in a kind of contemporary way.
Yeah.
In modern age, probably not, but back then, I mean, maybe that behaviour was more common. You would have people who grew up in rural backgrounds who are a bit.
I also don't think that success. So you can have success with having more relationships with the next person, but you've acted completely ignobly, and you probably have sold yourself very short as a human. And so what I see with his encounters is that pure, honest attraction of an individual, and not trying to push boundaries, only trying to make sure that you cross those boundaries when the other person is completely complicit and is really excited to be there with you, as excited as you are to be with them. I think that's something that you don't see in, as you talk about, contemporary novels or contemporary movies, and it's something that I think is
for me, it's more of an idealist rather than a realist. I thought.
No, I think bring it back to kind of the love part. I think reading this book made me realise that, I think because the idea of love is so pervasive, it's in pop music, it's in movies. Every movie's got a love story. Everyone at some point says they've been in love or fallen in love. So it's something people ubiquitously think they understand, but actually they don't. And there's very few artists who manage to capture it. And so it's actually quite an esoteric thing to understand love. And I think reading it, I realised how difficult it is to write a genuine love story. How kind of seeing all the strands and actually analysing it from an external perspective. Because there are periods in your life where you go, oh, I'm in love. And then you sit back and go, why? What does that mean? Or it's quite difficult to actually examine or figure out. So I think it made me appreciate more. This book made me appreciate more the kind of writing of a love story.
I mean, talking about the realist that you were talking about before, and I actually disagree with you on this, because I think Maria is a realist,
Yes.
right? And yet she is the one who falls in love with Rafe.
Slowly but surely, yes.
And the reason why is because he's a source of unconditional love
Yes.
that has been non-present in her life for years.
Yeah.
And the fact that he is that pure innocent himself is the reason that she if he was this macho realist that you were talking about, she would have binned him months before.
Of course she would have.
So I think love is a more complicated narrative than being a realist or being a pragmatist. There's 7 billion people in this world, and there's so many different individuals and so many different personalities that you can't necessarily put a formula to it.
You're right. I know. I'm thinking more in my head. You're living in a village. There's 5 young men. There's 5 young women. You've got to be confident in order to get one of them. Not that sort of.
I actually disagree with calling her a realist. I mean, I think she's a pessimist. She doesn't. She clearly overanalyzes and has an overly negative view towards everything. Like, it's not her worldview isn't. Obviously, she had a difficult experience, but it's not actually realistic of the world she lives in. Because even when there's this person there in front of her who adores her and she clearly loves, she denies it to herself. She says, "I can't possibly love you because it's not something I can do." And
there's one part in the book where I thought I didn't think she was sane of mind. In some, she was rambling. Do you remember that? She was just going on a tangent about.
She did that a few times.
She did it a few times where she just went off on one, and it was like, I'm not sure if she's actually okay.
I actually thought her response was quite normal. If you're ever in a position that it's a job or something else that you are the desired candidate and they really want you, that immediately to me always puts me like, are they really that good? As soon as you're wanted, you feel that you're above that position. I think that's what Maria. She gets this guy who is completely devoted to her, and it must be quite hard to say actually this is the one. You're always chasing something more, aren't you? If you found the person who says I will devote my life to you, you've always got that in the back head. Is there something? Am I going to miss out if I say yes now? Or there's
that scene in the bar.
Actually.
Sorry. What you carrying with?
Oh, I was just saying it was an interesting point.
Oh yeah.
Carry on.
Oh, I'll say it again, I guess.
It's that scene in the bar where I think like 2 types of men. Rafe is the person who would never even dare
look at her
or do anything like that. And then there's the other type of guy who thinks it's okay to kiss someone's back. Touch it and just grab it. Yeah. But it's one of those. There's 2 types of men in some senses.
I think there's more of a spectrum because Rafe is almost a kind of guy who, even when he's with a woman, wouldn't think to kiss her on the back.
No.
He would overanalyze it and
exactly.
and then just decide to do.
And by the
nothing.
time he decided to do it, the night would be over. He's the
Yeah.
only one left in the bar.
Yeah.
But the one thing that must be quite difficult for Maria to extract from him is like passion. I mean, people want passion in their relationships. I agree with your point that if someone's too easy or somebody adores you too quickly, it does make you question it. And it's never a case of going, oh, that's great.
Yeah.
But something people do want from relationships is kind of like passion.
You've got to have a balance. You've got to have a balance of being kind and sensitive, but you've also got to be bold in the right situations. I mean, I think he is fairly bold in certain situations. He rushes to places if he needs to be there, like the hospital, and when she falls ill, he definitely makes the right decisions at the right times.
See, for me, that's the only Maria really falls in love with him is after the hospital. That is when the firm love, because she knows he will always be there for her.
Well, she becomes the weaker party in the equation then because she becomes reliant on him.
Yeah.
Whereas before she almost assumes this, mature, life tutor role, taking this poor innocent boy around and showing him what the real world's like. And then after that, she relies on him to feed her soup. So I think it completely rebalances their relationship quite a lot.
Something that we do need to talk about as an old man is the guilt he feels. And the reason he feels this guilt is he's had this relationship with Maria. And then he goes back to Turkey. Maria goes to what would probably be modern day Hungary to go back to her family. And they're once he goes back to Turkey and once she goes back to Hungary, they're sharing letters for maybe about 5
Yeah,
months,
yeah.
and the letters stop. And she's even organising at that point to go over to Turkey, and the letters stop. And for about something like 15 years, he's wondering what happened, and he assumes she's gone off with another man or whatever. But as it turns out, is that she died.
Did you think that? Did you when you heard about her letters stopping? Did you actually think? Did it cross your mind that she might have died? 'Cause I guessed it at some point. I thought, oh god, well, this.
Well, she was ill.
You know,
she was ill
she was
already.
ill, and I just thought, oh, I didn't want to believe it. In the book, I thought, oh god, that would just be too sad.
The thing I didn't really understand is that one night where Maria encourages them to get drunk. It's like New Year night or something, and then he sleeps in her bed. I didn't realise they'd ever had sex together.
Yeah, no, they did. But that's what was so great about.
And then they find out he has a child with her.
Yeah.
But I never realised in the book. When I read those pages, I thought he was sleeping with her.
Yeah, it's very subtle.
Yeah,
It doesn't say it explicitly, but the implication is they had sex.
The last words before they wake up together is, "She kissed me furiously," and then it cuts to the morning.
Yeah.
So basically, none of that is just it's not described in the book. So
which is what I love about
that's
it.
great.
Yeah.
It's because it just.
Well, that's what completely surprised me at the end of the book when he finds out that he had a child with her.
Yeah.
Because I never knew they'd had sex.
I thought it at that personal experience.
Where is my erotica novel? And we're back. Whew. Okay.
It's about time.
About that time, chips.
Give it a little spruce up this whiskey and ice.
You know, I might actually try it with a bit of ice, see if it's any different.
Yeah, I know. Is it heathen to drink it with ice? I don't know. What's the?
I think it's just
the convention,
preference.
Yeah.
I've always preferred my whiskey with ice.
Yeah, I like on the rocks. Just sounds cool, doesn't it?
Well, it sounds very cool.
Yeah.
I mean,
On the rocks with no ice, especially. People's thoughts of the whiskey.
I feel like I'm sitting in a bar in Scotland, and the waves of mist are just hitting me. You know.
Oh, what a beautiful little analogy.
Yeah, that is nice.
I don't know how to live up to that. I just think it's very nice. No, I'm really enjoying it. What I think I enjoy most about it is it's really warming. Maybe compared to some of the other whiskies you've had, I think it comes from that kind of spiciness and the little.
For me, this is the first one that I feel is a bit sophisticated. That I've had. There seems to be like an amalgamation of flavors. They've gone with a bit of heat, a bit of sweet, a bit of spice. You know, there isn't one. It's not a clean whiskey. It's a real mixture, which I really like.
It's almost combining a lot of elements of the whiskies you've drunk before.
Exactly,
the little,
yeah.
Like peatiness, the sweetness.
I love
the
how we're like
penguin.
slowly, kind of like picture book style. We've gone for a really, the Smokehead was like the most briny, smoky, peaty one.
Yeah.
And so like, we know what the flavour of peat is. Pendragon's like the sweetest one. So we know kind of what the flavour of sweet is. And now
It's quite a classic whiskey.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Simple and nice.
Simple and nice, and it does.
I don't think this is simple.
I think
this
it's got quite a lot of
is more
complexity.
sophisticated. Yeah, I think this is a complex one.
I drink it and I know
Is
I'm not.
whiskey ever? Is it ever simple?
Well, you do get some bare bitch whiskies. I mean,
That's true.
Whenever I order whiskey at a bar, that's the one I seem to find.
It's no Jack Daniels.
I mean, like the Smokehead had only one flavour and one experience. Yeah, it was like sticking your head in an oven. Yeah, sticking your head in a coal oven almost. And then the Wild Turkey was just bourbon, so it was just sweet and.
Yeah, it was sweet but hellish alcoholic.
Yeah. I mean, we got saltiness, peatiness, sweetness. You got spiciness. That's quite a lot of different flavors going on together. So I think it's probably the most interesting one we've drunk.
Yeah. So heads up to Scotland. I'm half Scottish, so big up the Clandem.
It's amazing. We all.
And he can never go back to Scotland. Matthew, what are your thoughts?
I like it.
God, that's
Moving on.
That's why he gets the big bucks.
Great to have you,
It's
man.
just- Direct, decisive.
Okay, so I think the big thing that all of us, when we were discussing after the interlude, what was the thing that we missed in our discussion? I think that the key point was one of the last scenes, and it's when Raif finds out that Maria's not only dead, but on the one time that we find out in this book that they had sexual intercourse, that actually spawned a child. And not only did it spawn a child, but child is there when he finds out, because he meets one of Maria's relatives, which we touched on before, was actually a kind of love interest. But he meets her in Turkey spontaneously and finds out that Maria's dead, and that it's likely that, well, not likely, it is, this child that she's with is his daughter. I think that's, I don't know where to start with that one.
I just found it incredibly sad. I don't get rocked by books much often, but that made me feel just completely sad at what could have been.
I think it's very turbulent for him, because almost the most painful element of her sudden disappearance when she stopped writing back was that he thought she'd found somebody else. And in a kind of quite a sadistic way, I think that felt worse to him than thinking that maybe she died. So I think it's quite a strange revelation for him to realise that because he
was the love.
He was the love, yeah.
There was kind of a sweet release, though, in some ways. He did that kind of. It's like when someone.
It's like the soul met,
know,
but the body didn't. If that, I know how stupid that sounds.
Sometimes when you find out some news and someone's died, but it's a relief in some ways as to know what actually happened to them. In some ways, I felt like he kind of could move on a little bit, knowing that she died.
Personally, I got really annoyed with Raif at this point, because Raif, he never made as many attempts as he should have to find out what happened to her. This relative.
I mean, we are talking about a different world than we currently are in. It would have been very hard. We can't just send, an Instagram post to Maria.
Yeah, but no, he's been living in the hostel with this woman who is a relative of this lady. Yeah. And when he leaves, she's still there. He could still send a letter to find out about it, but he never does it, and he says that.
Really? When?
So
I think Matthew's right. I think he does like have a little debate with himself over whether to get in contact with her to find out what's happened. But
and he decides it's too awkward.
Yeah, I think Matthew is right. Yeah,
it's really quite pathetic. And then so when he finds out that he is he's a father to her child, he doesn't say, "I am the father to this child." He hides away from it. Yeah. For me, it's the nail into the coffin to the older gentleman that we then see at the end of the book. One that is in so much self-denial, not only about this relationship that went on and is how meek his life has been after that, but maybe even the guilt that he never did anything more after that.
I see Maria as she was the fire of the book. Okay.
Yeah.
And basically, as soon as he left the fire, everything else was cold again. He became back. He got back to his normal self. He retreated from the real world that he loved so much with her. He's gone back to his shallow self. His shell.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And basically, he reverted back to his original self. She was the warmth that kept him alive, and it's so sad to see a character just completely give up.
Something else that annoyed me about him is when he does find out that in fact she did die, and that she didn't go for another man. He talks in the book about how he's sort of happy to find this out, but for me also he should have been racked with a lot more guilt over the fact that this woman did die, and probably one of the reasons that she did die is she'd been weakened by childbirth that had been his child. but that dialogue never seems to happen in the book.
They do say it was a direct result of the childbirth, that she got ill from that.
But I think that's harsh. I generally think that's very harsh on Rafe. Like, what is he supposed to do? We're talking about in an age of there is no instant communication. He's back in Turkey. In order to get back to Berlin, he's got to take probably like a 4-day transport to get there, and then he doesn't know where she lives. She's moved address. We're not talking about that you could just set up back in Berlin and we're going to find her.
Yeah, I do agree with Elliot. At that time, how would you go about locating someone who's disappeared? How would you even begin? It is, in a way, an impossible task. Maybe he could have done more, maybe not. But for me, what is more telling is his reaction to effectively meeting his child. And it feeds into this whole kind of indulgent melancholy he's got, where even though he thought she'd run away and left him, and then he finds out, no, it wasn't. She actually died. She spoke about Raif because the woman mentions, she kept on talking about Turkish man who she had the child with. The child's right there. She's a living connection to Maria, and yet he still can't reach out and grab that, even when he seems to feel such like neutral emotions towards his own children and his own family.
It's like he's dead inside.
It is, but that you would think that was like almost the child there would be a kind of spark, but he still doesn't have the kind of the passion to reach out and grab it. And then for me, that was really damning on him.
Yeah, you really want that spark.
No,
I know.
I felt the other way. I feel this is a character that has never been comfortable with himself, and you've read the whole book to this point, and now you expect him to act differently than his own intrinsic personality. I think that's he isn't this hero. He isn't this knight in shining armor. There is no happy ending. There are people in life that exist without having the grandeur dream of happiness. It doesn't always occur, and I don't understand. If he reveals himself as her father, that's going to just complicate issues for this young girl more than it's going to solve them.
You don't know that because she's going to grow up wondering who
her
this
father
father is.
Yeah.
And imagine if you were that girl and in some strange kind of fate you found out your father was right there talking to your aunt and never mentioned he was the father. You would feel that he was completely callous, that it was just so undignified in my perception, and it really put forth the question of how much of his kind of melancholy and his depression is justified and how much of it is self-inflicted, because there he was just he had an opportunity almost there to rebuild a life, or like you were saying, start the fire in his cold dead heart again, and he just let it go away without even that much of a thought. I mean, obviously he was in shock, but he just watched the girl on the train pull away.
The man is drawn to darkness. Opposite of the way a moth is drawn to light, he's just drawn to darkness the whole time.
Just like, can you imagine how many, not just this book, but in reality, how many people in the 1920s, 1930s meet people in a different city and end up having a romance with them and never see them ever again?
True.
And it's just, for me, that's the heartbreak of this whole book. Like, like being able to have this incredible adventure with someone and meeting them and your life becoming, and communication levels back in the day, you would never be able to see them again. There's not like today where you can literally look someone up on Facebook, or
we've got the opposite. We've got ghosting,
where
they know you're alive, and you just ignore them.
And it's just it must have been heartbreaking for so many people back in that day.
This is something he almost neglects. He's quite arrogant in his own feelings, where he never seems to appreciate the fact that from Maria's perspective, they've parted. She's found out she's pregnant in a time where being, a single mother openly discussing a foreign father who's no longer around would probably be quite taboo. Has had this horrible childbirth, has lost her life, and he never seems to sympathise with that. It still is internalised on him and his own suffering. And how cruel the world has been to me. And he never seems to have this realisation of, oh, well, at least I'm still alive. And I have the opportunity to talk to my daughter, and I probably didn't actually go through as hard a time as Maria did.
I found it hilarious how he viewed his own family. It was just like that was his wife. He married her. He had kids with her, and they didn't mean anything to him because he only focused on one individual.
Again, I wonder if
You know
this
what I mean?
is a slight depiction of what formal countries like maybe Turkey was, where relationships weren't necessarily about love; they were about just
Convenience,
yeah.
Oh, I think you probably had most relationships were probably vapid at that point. It was
Yeah.
early marriages or introduced marriages, or even maybe arranged marriages as well. I'm not sure, but
I mean, this is probably why this book, it is such a spark plug for a younger generation of Turkish people, because they
It's an argument. It's an argument for a more meaningful relationship when you're
Yeah.
older.
it's not that they have arranged marriage. Look, I don't know enough about Turkey, but I think for it to really hit a chord with a younger audience, I mean, it hit a chord with me as well. So, but I think there is something in it that in a more conservative society where marriages aren't necessarily supposed to be about love, that this book really sparks something that wasn't there before.
For you guys, what chord this most hit with you in relating yourself to Raif? For me, it was that how timid he was when he was younger.
Yeah.
And of course, I was that timid when I was younger. But of course, I grew out of it far, far younger than he ever did. He was as timid as a 23-year-old as I was as a 15-year-old.
So many chords struck with me. Honestly, at the amount of times I kind of thought that could be me, in that situation, entering a new city, meeting new people, and just the anxiety of what these people think of me, and it's all. I found that the character really relatable in so many ways.
I think a lot of the emotions he feels at their core, their most basic element, are relatable, but to him they're so kind of proliferated out to this extreme degree that I couldn't relate with that. I couldn't relate with how overly anxious he was and how over analytical he was. Yeah, people, everyone experiences anxiety and overanalyzes, particularly when it comes to kind of relationships. But the extent to which he did it, I didn't find particularly relatable. I mean, what I did find relatable was that almost, I don't want to say awkwardness, but yeah, almost the awkwardness of the way they fell in love, because so often you're portrayed, that the classic love story is, being swept off your feet, and it's infatuation on both sides and it's passion, but actually you have a lot of instances in your life where it's this difficult kind of almost course that you need to navigate, and there's lots of pitfalls.
Of course, you have to navigate. Like, what if? What happens if you made a different decision and you ended up doing something completely different? You know what I mean? It's the overriding thing was what if at the end of the book. What if something else would have happened? And there's a passage that I just want to read.
Please.
Like, the pain of losing something precious, be it earthly happiness or material wealth, can be forgot 10 over time. But our missed opportunities never leave us, and every time they come back to haunt us, we ache. Or perhaps we haunt what is nagging. Though the things that might have turned us out differently, because without that thought, we would have put it down to fate and accept it. That's
a great quote, actually.
I wanted to take a snapshot of that because I just thought that really summed up kind of how I felt.
Well, I remember reading that passage. I remember reading that passage and feeling that's exactly so true.
Yeah.
It's always about that missed opportunity. The one that you missed.
Because
At
least something you've lost, you obtained to begin with.
Yeah.
So
there's that classic the one.
Yeah.
We always she's the one. Kind of thing, and that the one was.
Kind of touching on this, it really reminded me of the first time you fall in love. That kind of not knowing what love is and kind of experiencing this weird phenomenon for the first time and having all of these weird senses from darkness come into view.
Yeah, and it's completely frantic.
Yeah, and you don't understand what's going on, but you know that you're hooked, and that's I don't know. It was so. Yeah, there was like spider senses with how he was able to depict it.
Yeah, no, there was lines in the book which really hit me, and I was like, oh wow.
I thought out of all the books we've read today, I thought this was the most beautifully written. Like I know it's not maybe not the most what's it called brain intensive or but the way thought provoking sorry. But there was a tenderness to it that I haven't experienced in many books I've ever read.
Yeah, this is the exact same point I was making, where it made me realise, understanding and putting love on paper like that is so esoteric.
I think maybe if I was drinking whiskey while I was reading the book, I would have burst into tears at the end, because it really, I was on the brink at the end. I felt really moved.
You probably intensified that because you read so much of it in one as well.
Well, yeah, I actually.
I read it in 2 days.
Yeah, I read it today. And that's why it's maybe quite fresh in my head, maybe.
Can we explain exactly what happens at the end of the book?
Yeah, we should probably go ahead, Matthew.
What does it? I mean,
okay, so this diary is read about Raif's life and the love of his life, and then the death of her, and how he sort of wanders on in life without any real meaning, and then the book finishes. The diary finishes, and at that point the narrator puts the diary down and then goes to back to Raif's house to return the diary, to burn it, and then he comes to Raif's deathbed, and Raif's dead there, and that's hard hitting.
It wouldn't have been a really shit book if he'd have just tossed it in the fire.
Yeah. 30 pages though. Huh?
Do you know what I mean? The end. If he just went,
really quite warm. Yeah. or the opposite. Maybe that's the thing that gave him closure. It was the final thing that he hadn't had in his life. Someone to overlook who he was.
So that's a good question. Why did Raif become so attached to the unknown narrator? Because he took.
No, it's the opposite. Why did the unknown narrator become so attached with Raif?
But then again, no. It's not really, because he actually gave him access to his diary and let him into his house.
After a lot of insistence.
Yeah, there was a lot of, because basically he said, "Can you please bring me my diary from my office?" And then he brings the diary and he says, "Look, mate, you're on your deathbed. What harm is there in me reading this?" I mean, he's there like, toss it in the fire. I don't give a shit.
Do you think he kind of felt that this guy was taking an interest in him?
Yes, of course. That's what I said. I said there's two people in his entire life that he feels.
The narrator and Maria.
That's
it.
I think at his core, he never wanted the narrator to read it. I think there's a level of just practicality here where the narrator argued with him so much, and he was, when you're feeling awful, when you're, very, very sick, you don't have the energy to argue. So I think he just kind of capitulated.
To be fair to the narrator, he did attend Raif on many occasions prior to this, and they did seem to form a relationship of someone.
They definitely had a relationship,
the relationship to go and visit him on his deathbed, and to go collect his things and talk to him and know the family quite well. There was a relationship there. I agree that yes, I don't think Raif intuitively as a human would have wanted anything to be revealed from himself, and that's always goes back to my sympathy with the character, because I can completely relate to the fact that it's very hard to be 100% genuine to everybody around you. There's things in your soul and your personality that you do keep reserved. And, I do relate to that. Obviously not to the level Raif is, but, and so I do get where he is coming from on that perspective.
If your grandparents told you to burn a diary on their deathbed, would you burn it?
Of course.
You'd have to if they asked you.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want
You'd
to.
be a bit of a twat.
I wouldn't want to. But
I really wouldn't want to.
Yeah, but then it would be.
I'd want to read
very
it.
disrespectful reading it.
Yeah, can you imagine they die and then you've read that, and it just would be.
Maybe it's just pages of them complaining about you.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ. How can a child of mine produce such a shitty child? And they're like, I really shouldn't leave this around. Can you just throw it in the fire? You probably think it'll be this, this great secret of the family, but actually it's just them.
Pages of
abusing
Matthias is a terrible grandson.
He said his whole time for the last 20 years about me.
Or you could find anything in that diary. It could be like the S&M diary. It could just be like, a kind of novel about their swinger experiences. You don't know what you're getting into. You think you might know, but
I feel like this is a very nice diary to read in comparison to what you could be left with. You know, you've got Jimmy Savile's in the world. Anyone, I'm always suspicious of people who write diaries anyway.
Do you have?
Because I mean,
yeah. Do you have a criticism of the book?
I actually don't. I generally, I really enjoyed this book.
I only would. My only criticism is it didn't sound like a diary. You know, it's not a. It's a story he's wrote. It's not a diary.
Yeah, it's not a diary.
So basically, that's
True.
why.
But I think
that's
that's a criticism that is. Of course, it's got to be a readable novel. You know, it can't
Of
be
course.
like day 25, day
No, of
26,
course.
day.
Fair enough, but you know, does anyone write like that?
No,
You know,
but
No,
I
it's
think
not
it was
a
just a useful tool
It's a
to
yeah.
have a perception of
I almost
Aldrich
feel,
and then
I almost
young
feel like
Raif.
the narrator is actually writing this.
The only
He's
thing that
read
really
the diary and is
I'm interpreting it.
Yeah.
again.
I'll tell you the only other thing that bugged me about the book, and was you learn that Maria's a fucking good painter. Like she painted a really amazing self-portrait of herself, and there's no other mention really
Her artwork.
of her artwork
Yeah.
after that.
No.
And I'm like, oh shit, I thought they would get into that. You know, I thought.
But
they'd-
they're saying
I
that the
thought they'd
book is
explore a little
named
bit more about.
Madonna in a fur coat. So
Fair enough, but
there-
you know,
there is a
I'm
lot of
intrigued to
emphasis.
why she's a painter, and you know, I know she's done stuff.
But I think that's a big part of the relationship is she kind of wants to be known beyond just being an artist. You know, it's that thing where, say, if you were going out with a girl or seeing a girl,
Yeah.
and she just kept on talking about your art.
True.
After a while, you probably go, "Oh, can we just fucking talk about something else?"
Yeah.
But how good do you reckon the painting was? You know, to move someone.
well,
like,
this has been my.
do you know what I mean? Because you know this was never really talked about further on in the book. You know.
So one thing, I've been dying to ask you this.
Okay.
How is your depiction of Madonna in a fur coat? Because I mean that's
It took-
beautiful.
honestly, in that passage where he's describing the painting, it's really hard because really you see what you want to see. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so he probably saw that painting different to everybody else might have seen.
So I'm just asking your visit.
Yeah,
because,
what I think the
We'll
painting
ask
look-
everybody else. I promise.
What I think the painting looks
Yeah.
like.
If you could paint it.
Yeah, if you could paint it, yeah.
Beauty. You know, do you know what I
Is
mean?
it-
You know, I
Is
think
she
I think
beautiful?
I think what he's swept away by is how, you know, what is he's trying to look into her eyes and her brain and think, what is she thinking? What is she, you know, because that's what he's fascinated by. What is she looking to the distance about? You know, what is all that about? You know,
It's the confidence though. that
It's
he's
a real kind of
fascinated
Mona
about.
Lisa situation, isn't it?
yeah, it's impossible. It's an endless fucking debate. You know, it really
Yeah.
just goes on and on.
Yeah, I agree
It's
with that.
it's
I'll have
really
to do
hard.
Maradona and the fur coat then.
I was thinking more of the IKEA monkey in the fur coat.
What IKEA monkey?
You ever heard about that story about the IKEA monkey? So,
I'm fascinated.
so a
Well,
lady.
I haven't heard about it, but I'm fascinated
I mean,
now.
they're two words that I wouldn't ever put together.
So a lady left. A lady was going around IKEA with a pet monkey, but it was the middle of winter, so she put the monkey.
Where in the world was this where she had a pet monkey in
I think this
IKEA?
is America.
Oh, that makes sense.
And,
Was it Carol Baskin?
it was... Anyway, so she put the monkey in a little fur coat. She forgot about the monkey when she left the store, and the store got locked up, and there were all these pictures at the windows of the IKEA store. There's a little monkey walking around in a little fur coat. Look through the windows. So it's the IKEA monkey.
What's the story?
That was the story.
And we will be editing. What time in the night was that? I think that deserves a good edit.
Oh no, that's going in.
Oh yeah, sorry, that was actually the best part of it.
People will be tuning in just to the IKEA.
Yeah. Tell the IKEA monkey story again, please.
Tell the one of the Waitrose cow.
Hello, people.
What? I'll have you know.
Hey, Matt, can you tell it again?
Yeah.
I'll have you know the internet crowd loves the IKEA monkey.
Oh, I'm sure
The
they.
internet cow.
More than they love the Waitrose cow.
Ooh.
Oh, that's
Bold calls, mate.
ah.
We have to do a poll.
I think we're getting excited.
Yeah, really?
I mean, I thought the IKEA monkey was going to be a love story. I thought that's
Yeah,
how it was
I know.
going on. And your parents left you in the IKEA with this monkey. I know about it.
I'm just surprised they
It's
gave him
you
a
and the
fur
monkey
coat.
in the
Oh,
fur
you're
coat.
a monkey.
Like normally they don't.
I actually stole the fur coat off the monkey.
Yeah.
It died.
Whoa.
Oh, Paul, we should end the podcast.
Now that you've just admitted to animal abuse, man. Probably, monkey was probably endangered, wasn't it? You sick fuck.
Is it animal? I mean, monkeys are so close to humans.
I said, well, then it's
98.8%.
It's GBH.
Yeah.
Or just murder.
Murder.
It was
Murder.
even worse.
Murder.
99.8%.
Which Marvel character would Raif or Maria be?
This is from Ben, so I think Ben needs to give us the first little.
I have not thought about this.
Oh, you should see his face. There is. Yeah, we see through that.
Vacant eyes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm seeing veins.
Yeah.
Oh, I know veins. Before. Deep thoughts going on.
Maybe he's Eric Banner. Maybe he's the Incredible Hulk. Maybe he is.
Oh,
No,
he's
it's a
Eric
good shot,
Banner. Yeah.
actually,
Like,
Maybe he is.
But his Hulk is
I'm
the kind of
talking about Eric Banner in real life, not the Green Monster.
I quite like your analogy because Maria's the Hulk, and he's Eric Banner.
That's not
And
what,
that's
that's
the
not what I was
song.
thinking. But
You bloody idiot. That made complete sense.
no, I actually think so.
It's true.
So really, the character, you know, inside.
Yeah, exactly. Inside, he would kill everyone.
So, but yeah, and he's internally frustrated and externally frustrated constantly, and just trying to fit into society.
I mean, I don't think I'm going to be able to offer an alternative to that.
Well, I've got
He's
a
definitely not Iron Man.
I've got
Yeah.
I think for me, he's got to be Doctor Strangelove.
That's a strange.
What? That's a
Doctor
different
Strange.
character. He's not in the fucking.
Doctor Strange.
Doctor
Well, he's
Strange.
Benedict
Doctor
Cumberbatch.
Strange.
Yeah,
Is the
yeah.
one about the
Oh, the fucking
Doctor
Nazi,
Strangelove. That's you're mental, mate.
Doctor Strange.
Doctor
really?
Strange.
Yeah, I mean, he's strange.
Doctor Strange isn't
No,
actually
Doctor
that strange.
Strangelove.
Okay, I mean, what
You're just going off the name.
You're mental. Oh, it's fine.
the well, he's a bit strange. And he's a Marvel character.
I think mine was better.
Yeah, well, I agree with you.
Doctor
I
Strangelove.
thought he was called Doctor Strangelove.
No.
I'm voting for Ben.
Well, you've got to narrate your own one first.
Don't mention the IKEA monkey.
Yeah.
I think he's a bit
Not
of
a Marvel character.
I think he might be a bit of a Peter Parker. You know, Peter Parker's obsessed with what's his love interest?
Mary Jane.
Yeah.
Mary Jane. Obsessed with
Sweet
that
Mary
girl. He's quite fragile, really. As Peter Parker, he's quite a fragile, meek character.
He transforms, doesn't he? Once he gets that superhero power,
That's true.
which I don't see. I mean, I think Hulk is a good one.
Hulk is the best. Matthew,
Wolver-
give us.
I mean, you can't be worse than
Wolverine.
mine.
Wolverine.
Wow.
Okay,
How?
Wolverine, explain.
Half wolf.
Explain, please explain. Please explain, Matt. Oh God, I'm looking forward to this.
You see how earlier on in his life that he was a young man. Well, Wolverine was also.
What
young
was
man.
Wolverine's real
So we're
name?
talking about
Wolverine.
aging.
What was
No,
Wolverine's
all of
real
us
name?
understand that Wolverine was a young man when he was.
He wasn't called Wolverine when he was a boy. What was his name?
It was Raif. And in the same way that Wolverine had all that metal put inside his body and had all this weight to carry, Raif had the same thing. He had all this weight to carry in his heart.
And his
Wow,
long fingers.
how have you connected
I am
that?
fucking dying right now. This is ridiculous.
Carry on going. I'm quite enjoying this. That was.
brilliant.
So you know where Wolverine gets angry and he has all his claws come out of his hands?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Well, Raif has his heart.
but it doesn't come out of his hand. I mean,
I mean, it might do.
I think the narrator probably would have been a bit more distant to him if he just stood up and a pen came out of his knuckle and he started drawing.
That is good.
Okay, I've only watched two Marvel.
Well, I think to come out of his hand may be true.
And who's Maria then? For me, she's Black Widow. Completely confident.
I think
in a
Catwoman-
world surrounded by men.
Catwoman she's badass bitch.
That's not the Marvel universe, you idiot.
Oh,
it's the
that's right.
DC.
Oh, that's
Jesus.
embarrassing. You're gonna have to leave. Matthew, I actually respect how you tied that in to the book. I'm not going to lie. I mean, you started with 0 and you made something of it. I would put her as Rogue from X-Men.
Oh, it's a good shout. Yeah. Fair enough. Well, anyone she touches. Are you going to elaborate on this, or
I'm going to let you because you
Mine
articulate
just
it so much better than me.
So she turns them to gold?
Yeah, no, but basically anyone Rogue touches, she kills.
Oh, nice.
But she died, so
but she's quite a tough character who actually is very.
But her super ability, is basically she touches anyone and they die.
Mm.
You know that. I'm not sure it works, but I think. I think it's a good comparison. Yeah.
Okay, so I think that moves us on
No,
nicely.
no,
Matthew, apologies. He loves this
Let's go to
question.
Matthew.
Yeah,
come on, Matthew.
Come on, Matt.
Take your time.
Yeah, I've gone for Catwoman, which was wrong.
Make it a good one.
Catwoman. Well, out of all those Marvel characters that I know, that are female.
Let's talk about a smaller list, just women, you know.
It's a short list. It's a short list. Moving on.
Okay, we're on to our next fantastic question. What would the book be like if it was set in COVID times?
Madonna in a fur mask.
Good, yeah.
Yeah, no, so Madonna in a fur mask, he sees this woman on the opposite side of the supermarket, and he sees her eyes, and he falls in love with her. He doesn't know who she is. And then he meets her outside the supermarket, and she takes the mask off, and he talks to her.
That's a guy.
Yeah, he's got a moustache.
But he's too far invested by he's been locked down for 6 months. And he just takes a chance. I'm not sure you said anything.
Yeah.
Wait, what was the?
Okay.
So when you've got your Madonna in a fur mask, or you've got your Raif and his mask in the supermarket.
Yeah.
He's spotted Madonna in a fur mask.
What type of groceries is Raif going for when he meets Madonna?
Oh, he's going for the budget cheese.
No, because that would cause too much judgment, and he wouldn't be able to cope with that.
You're right.
He wouldn't be able to cope with that.
No, you're right.
He would get the middle ground of everything.
Yeah. He's going for the absolute middle ground of everything.
Nothing exotic.
Yeah, because
he wouldn't even get
conversation
kiwi,
starter if he gets budget cheese.
Yeah, and there's this one point where the woman in the fur mask puts her hand
on his
a part
mid-market cheese.
Mid-market cheese he's about to take, and she puts her hand down.
How romantic!
And then he puts her hand down on it, and they're like,
and they spread COVID germs.
No, it's like, and they say to each other, "We're now in the same bubble. We got to be in the same bubble.
Oh, I like
Otherwise,
that.
we're not COVID secure."
Or maybe you know how you've got all these COVID like banners and adverts everywhere. He walks into the supermarket, and she's one of the women on the banner in her fur mask, and he goes back every day to look at this advert in the supermarket, like "Stay 2 feet apart, wear your mask." Maybe.
Yeah.
And then eventually she comes in, and then they fall in love over the cheese.
Oh yeah, no. Maybe when they meet each other, she's like, "It's not a 2 meter restriction anymore. It's a 1 meter restriction. Come and meet closer to me."
Yeah.
And that's like the real intimacy starts then.
I'll meet you later.
Oh, the more I thought about that, the worse it got. Oh.
Yeah, like he has to isolate in a foreign country for 2 weeks.
Oh, I like it. Yeah.
So he has to go there, and it's a new country for him, and he has to isolate in a room for 2 weeks. And the maid.
Yeah, go carry on. This is brilliant.
Basically, has to give him 3 tests in 1 week. You know, and he.
I think I've seen this.
So basically, on the first encounter, you know, when they give.
What, maid test?
Yeah, the maid test.
Oh, it's brilliant.
So yeah, they kind of get to know each other on the first date, but / test.
Obviously, the testing regime is slightly different to the UK testing regime.
On the second
Okay, I think that moves me.
us nicely onto the next question. What would Maria and Raif Tinder profiles be?
Oh, so I think we're gonna have to put some thought into this.
Yeah, it's not
So
an easy one.
Raif, I think he'd be one of those where all the pictures would never be of his face. It'd be him facing away, looking out onto olive groves,
Yeah.
or you know, sitting on a park bench alone.
Or like a picture of a beach.
Yeah, or a
Yeah.
picture of a beach.
I think his intro picture would be not a picture of himself.
Yeah, definitely. So I don't think you'd ever see his face in any
And
of
what
them.
would be his intro lines?
Don't judge me.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, what is like a introvert?
Like art, soap, and
I am.
No. It wouldn't even be that artistic. An introvert wouldn't even go for something artistic. That's going someone looking for love.
Yeah, quite frankly, I being an introvert myself, maybe I would probably say, I don't know, just maybe a line. Maybe
It would be a line, yeah.
intrigues me. Like I'm Hakuna Matata.
There is no way Raif would have a Hakuna Matata on his Tinder page. There is absolutely no way.
Okay, I reveal myself, guys. It works so well. Clearly.
Yeah.
How many Pumbas did you get?
That brings us to a very nice end of Whiskey and Words this evening. So before we depart, we are going to do a periodic tasting review of not only the whiskey but also the book. And yes, we're going to try and freestyle this. So I know for the audience and the many listeners, we were periodically going on a 1 to 10. But check this out. We are now moving from the 1 to 10 to what, I won't name names, but somebody suggested, and the reason why we suggested the 1 to 40, which sounds a bit Mike Bassett, which Alan Partridge, but I like the 1 to 40. And the 1 to 40 is 1 to what whiskey is averagely distilled at, which is 40%. So we're now going to try and distill these reviews within this 1 to 40 reviews.
Distill.
I know,
Distill.
yes, it's going
Very
to take...
clever. Very clever.
But anyway, Matthew, how do you rate this whiskey
Well,
out of 40?
okay, well, this for me is the favourite whiskey, my favourite whiskey out of all the whiskies we've had. So I give it an 8 out of 10. And with a new system,
Wait, what? No.
It's 32 out of 40.
So no.
Quick
The
maths.
whole point of the system was not to use the 10s.
I know it's the.
But you've just confused
Okay,
it.
anyway,
Just give
anyway,
32.
Let's
Let's do it again. No, let's do it again.
Let go
Do it
of
again.
your 10.
Okay,
Let's do it
out
again.
of 40, what would you give this without having to add it up in your head?
Oh, it would obviously be a 32 out of 40.
Excellent.
A
That's a great
33
answer. I
would
love
be too
that.
high.
Are you going
But
to
a
put?
31 would be far too low.
Are you going to
It's
throw?
a 30. It's a 32 out of 40.
Are you going to throw some decimals in there?
No. Don't be a heathen.
Okay, Luke.
I'm really conflicted. I don't know whether this is my favourite or the Pendrin's still my favourite. I feel like I've got a real soft spot for the Pendrin now. But I think this might just pip it to the post. So I'm probably going to go this. The Matthew's score seems pretty reasonable at a 32. Yeah. I'm going to go the same.
Well, I'm an eternal positive person, so I will go for a 38.
Brilliant.
It's been fantastic. I feel great.
Yeah, I
And,
mean,
I've got to be honest. This has been
I think
this has been extremely fun, and I'll have to give the whiskey a lot of credit.
well, I mean,
So I'm
The
gonna go
whiskey
for-
has helped.
No, actually, I'll bring it down. I'm going to go for 36.
36.
Okay, wait.
Oh!
And I want to hear the
no,
rationale
we
for bringing
didn't.
it down for a 38.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm
36.
going for a 30. But I think this is the best whiskey we've had to date. But
What, by humanity? Or?
well, if I am defined as humanity, then yes. But I don't doubt that definition holds much sway, bar amongst myself.
It's a very close circle.
But yeah, I think honestly, it's been
it kind of has introduced a lot of different flavors that we've had in many whiskies into one, and that's we're all on a bit of a journey. At least I am, for my own self. And so this whiskey is kind of amalgamated a lot of different flavors that we haven't necessarily had reach in all the bottles we've had to date. And so I think it is the best one to date that we've had.
It's definitely the most complex.
But the reason why I've only given it 30 is I think we can go further, and that's why I don't want to go too high on the spectrum, because I think give us another 10 whiskies, we might, maybe I'm undervaluing this, and that's why I should add is I'm undervaluing on the basis that I think there could be better, but that is only because my knowledge is kind of limited.
And we've got to put it in the context of the price. What was the price of this bad boy?
This bad boy came to a record of 25 English pounds, which I know for everyone listening to this in 2025 means fuck all. But for the 2020 audience, that's still 25 figures.
That's for the quality of whiskey. That's very good price.
Really good.
Very good price.
Absolutely brilliant.
It was special.
Okay, and I move on to the next port of call, and that is the book review of this evening. Luke, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, I mean, I think as we've touched upon.
We're reviewing this out of 40 as well, or do we review this out of 100? I think.
Let's do it out of 40 to lack confusion.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think for me, as I've said through the podcast, I enjoyed the fact it was a lot more of a tender novel than anything we've read so far. I think he captures the complexity and the nebulous nature of love very, very well. He articulates the story incredibly well and builds these very interesting characters, flawed characters, but extremely interesting. And so I can see why it's held in such high regard. And for me, it's quite defining because it's made me realize how tricky it is to write a genuine love story. And picturing myself trying to capture all the things he captured was extremely difficult. Whereas with some of the other books, it was a lot easier to get a handle on from my own perspective. So I actually very much admire this novel. In terms of out of 40, I would probably give it a 30. I'm going to give it a 30 out of 40. Yeah.
That's pretty decent.
I really enjoyed this book. What I particularly liked was just a narration of a male character was tender and pure and didn't have the vices that a lot of male characters seem to come with in modern life and most books. They're either assassins or they're charlatans. There's very few pure male characters out there in the world, and that's what I really liked about it. It was a nice depiction, or not a nice, but a different depiction of what a man can be. The way that he narrates love is something that I haven't felt in a long time in reading a book. I don't think anyone's captured that kind of complexity. So again, I think for me this is a really good book. I give it 32.
You first, Ben?
Yeah, I've got to be honest. At the start of this book, I really didn't think it would be as interesting as it turned out to be. It really grew on me as the book went on, and I've got to be honest. I loved the characters of Raif and Maria. They were just fantastic, and I was completely drawn to their relationship. I felt so strong when Maria died. I just felt that was the most incredible, twist in the book. I thought it was fantastic, and honestly, it really hit me hard, and it kind of left me with the feeling. What the overriding message of the book was that if you find someone in your life that makes you feel incredible, don't let go of them. Okay?
Well said, sir.
Basically, I just feel like Raif was a guy who had his opportunity, but really messed up.
Yeah.
Okay? So make sure when you find the one, you do as best as you can to keep hold of it. Okay.
Newsom.
Yeah. And it, you know,
Just lose them in hog
Yeah.
time. In all seriousness, you know, don't fuck around. You know, it's honestly, and in life, you know, life moves so quickly that you know you need to make sure you make the most of every moment.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I love that.
For me, the only real criticism I have of this book is the internal monologue that's going on with Raif's head of the whole time, where he's talking about every interaction he has with Maria or anything in society, and he's always self-doubting himself. And for me, that became tiresome going through the book. But that being said, there were some wonderful snippets from the book where there's some really insightful bits. So I'd have to give it, out of 40, I'd have to give it a 28.
Oh, sorry, I didn't give my review.
Oh, yeah, sorry. What's your rating?
Sorry, Matt. I just reminded myself. You gave it a 28.
Yeah.
Elaborate. Sorry, and I'll give
So it's out of 40.
Out of 40. For me personally, how it made me feel, I want to give it a 35.
Fair.
Well,
Very fair.
on that, well, I want to say bombshell, but you know, I'm not Top Gear, so
You're not Alan Partridge.
I wish I was. Anyway, sorry. The next book we're kind of pensively thinking about a Christmas special. So, if the audience is willing to permit us, we will selfishly indulge into what's it, a Grinch?
I think, isn't it just called The Grinch?
You're joking. You're not going to review the Grinch.
Yes.
There's a lot in there.
I hope I'm involved.
Yes.
Yeah.
Of course you are. Audience, what do you think?
Oh, yeah. Sorry, let's put the fake cheer in. Anyway, we will be back with the Grinch.
Single try and actually avoid the whiskey for this one and get together a few different traditional Christmas drinks from around the world.
I still think we'll have a bottle of whiskey outside.
Obviously we will. We're alcoholics.
Everyone, cheers, man.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Absolute pleasure.
Yeah. Real pleasure.
Get on.